Imagine living through 2 world wars, the collapse of empires, and the wildest artistic revolutions in human history, only to paint like none of it ever happened. Picture a man who spent his life surrounded by the most radical modernists on Earth, yet his canvases looked like they were stolen from a 15th century Italian church. For nearly a century, critics couldn't decide who he actually was, a stubborn traditionalist, a brilliant provocateur, or a deeply unsettling voyeur. His name was Balthazar Klossowski de Rola, known simply as Balthus. But while his contemporaries were busy tearing down the very definition of art, Balthus was running a completely different playbook, one designed to break the rules by acting like they didn't exist. To understand just how strange this was, you have to look at Paris in the early 20th century. Art was in the middle of a brutal civil war. Picasso was shattering perspective, Jackson Pollock would soon pour paint straight out of cans, and the avant-garde declared the traditional painting was officially dead. Enter Balthus. Instead of joining the chaos, he did something genuinely shocking for the 1930s. He painted slowly, meticulously, and completely out of season. He didn't mock the old masters, he channeled them. But this wasn't just a case of old-fashioned stubbornness, it was a deliberate marketing strategy. By refusing to be modern, Balthus made himself impossible to ignore. This absolute confidence didn't come out of nowhere. It was baked into his childhood. Born in Paris in 1908 to a family of Polish-Jewish artists and intellectuals, young Balthazar grew up in a household where art was treated as a religion. But his world shattered when World War I forced his family to flee to Berlin, leading to his parents' separation. The emotional void was quickly filled by a new figure in his life, the legendary poet Rainer Maria Rilke, who became his mother's partner. While other kids were playing in the streets, Balthus was watching the European cultural elite change countries, hotels, and beliefs on a whim. Rilke didn't just teach him about poetry, he instilled in the boy an aristocratic belief that art stood entirely above ordinary human life. By the time he was 12, Balthus had already weaponized this upbringing. When his cat went missing, he drew a series of ink illustrations capturing the quiet mystery of the loss. Rilke was so impressed, he wrote a preface and had the story published as a book called Mitsu. This childhood project established 2 core elements that would define his entire career: an obsession with cats and a complete refusal to offer direct explanations. Decades later, he would paint his famous self-portrait, The King of Cats, treating the title with absolute seriousness. He realized early on that a painter who explains his work gives away his power, so he chose to let the public do the guessing instead. That silence became deafening in 1934, when Balthus finally unveiled himself to the Parisian art scene at the Galerie Pierre. He was friends with Alberto Giacometti and Joan Miro, but his breakthrough canvas, The Guitar Lesson, was nothing like theirs. It was a calculated, deeply disturbing subversion of classical music lesson tropes, echoing the composition of a religious pietà, but filled with stark, uncomfortable eroticism. The gallery kept the piece hidden in a back room, creating an instant storm of outrage. Critics immediately split into 2 camps. Some saw a brilliant psychological study of adolescent tension, while others condemned it as outright voyeurism. Balthus simply shrugged and issued a famous ultimatum to the press. Balthus is an artist about whom nothing is known. Now, let us look at the pictures. If you think that outrage is a relic of the 1930s, think again. The tension built into Balthus's canvases is still actively exploding today. In 2017, a massive online petition gathered thousands of signatures demanding that the Metropolitan Museum of Art remove his 1938 painting, Thérèse Dreaming, calling the artwork highly inappropriate for a public museum. The Met flatly refused. The museum argued that their entire purpose is to provide historical context and foster difficult conversations rather than censoring art that triggers public discomfort. The clash proved that Balthus had achieved exactly what he wanted. His art wasn't a passive decoration. It was a permanent, psychological tripwire. As his fame turned international, Balthus began constructing a persona to match his timeless style. He started signing his name as Count de Rola and adopted the rigid, ceremonial manners of an old-world aristocrat. Yet behind the velvet robes and grand gestures, those who knew him saw a hyper-disciplined, calculating professional who ran his studio like a factory. He didn't throw public tantrums or write furious manifestos like the Surrealists. He simply let his lifestyle do the talking. When he became the director of the French Academy in Rome, he looked less like a 20th century bureaucrat and more like a ghost from the High Renaissance who had somehow hijacked a modern office. He spent his final decades hidden away in the quiet mountains of Rosinière, Switzerland, living in a massive historic wooden chalet with his young Japanese wife and disciple, Setsuko. He slowed down even further, spending months on single landscapes, chasing a sense of absolute stillness. By the time he passed away in 2001, he was one of the incredibly rare artists to see their own work hung in the Louvre during their lifetime. But the central enigma of his life remains completely unsolved. Was he the last true defender of classical beauty, a master of calculated controversy, or just a man who spent 92 years running away from his own century? Next time you look at a Balthus canvas, ask yourself, are you looking at a masterpiece, or are you just caught in his trap? Let me know in the comments. Balthus chose to isolate himself, but today's creators need an audience to survive. So if you love art and want to keep it alive, go check out alibrio.co and support the visionaries of our own generation. Thank you for watching. Keep loving art, and I'll see you in the next story.